The cold November rain streaked down the windows of the Astoria restaurant, turning the warm, golden lights inside into floating smudges in the street's darkness. Outside, on the other side of the glass, stood Elias. He was a part of the night. A man so faded and forgotten, it was as if the shadows themselves had given birth to him. His worn-out coat could not stop the chill that seeped from the wet pavement into his bones. But the real cold wasn't in his empty stomach. It was in his gaze, which was fixed on the scene inside. He wasn't hungry for the steak and potatoes on the tables. He was hungry for something deeper. He was hungry for the warmth that rose from the laughter of men in their fine wool coats. Hungry for the respect seen in the waiter's gesture as he poured red wine into crystal glasses. Hungry for the sense of carelessness and security that allowed a woman to touch her diamond necklace with indifference. Elias was hungry for a life he had never even tasted. A life where a person was a somebody, not an invisible ghost. That night, when he returned to his cold, damp attic room, he lay on his narrow bed and listened to the sound of water dripping from the ceiling. Each drop was like a hammer blow, pounding his poverty into his skull. He had come to the conclusion that the world had two kinds of people, those who ate dinner and those who watched, and he would forever remain a spectator. But 3 days later, a door to another world opened for him. A door with a lawyer in an expensive raincoat and a leather briefcase standing behind it. The lawyer could barely hide his disbelief as he stepped into Elias's humble room. He brought news that sounded more like a cruel joke. A great uncle Elias had never even heard of had passed away on the other side of the ocean, and he, Elias, was the sole heir to an unimaginable fortune. A fortune that could buy every Astoria restaurant in every city in the world. In an instant, the invisible ghost of the street became the wealthiest man in the city. The first thing Elias did was return to that same restaurant. This time, the doorman opened the door for him with a deep bow. He sat at the best table and didn't open the menu. He told the waiter, "Bring me everything." That night, Elias wasn't eating food. He was devouring years of humiliation and hunger. Every bite tasted of revenge. This was only the beginning. Elias was thirsty to compensate for all the years of having nothing. He didn't buy a house. He bought a palace on the outskirts of the city, a palace with marble columns and gardens where fountains shot water into the sky. But the large, empty halls reminded him of the silence of his poverty in a more deafening way, so he filled them. He bought the most expensive furniture, the rarest rugs, and the strangest works of art. He knew nothing about art, but he understood prices very well. The more expensive, the better. He was using money to buy himself a new identity and a new past. Then came the friends. Wealth, like a powerful magnet, drew people to him. Men and women with ready smiles and flawless clothes surrounded him. They laughed at his unfunny jokes, praised his foolish ideas, and assured him his taste was impeccable. Elias knew they were there for his money, but he needed the illusion. For the first time in his life, he was seen. He was no longer a ghost. His parties became legendary throughout the city. Orchestras played in the garden, champagne flowed like water, and loud laughter continued until dawn. Elias would stand at the center of this storm, smiling, but deep down, he was still that hungry boy, standing behind the rain-streaked window. He was afraid that if the music stopped, if the guests left, he would turn back into that invisible ghost. So he made the music louder and the parties more lavish. To make up for his lost youth, he indulged in boundless pleasures. The casinos of Monte Carlo, the horse races in London, spontaneous trips on his private jet to faraway islands. He wasn't spending money. He was setting it on fire to feel its temporary warmth, to make him forget the coldness inside. His lawyer warned him repeatedly, "Master Elias, your fortune is vast, but it is not infinite. You must invest, not burn it." But Elias would just smirk at him. "You don't understand poverty. When you've spent your whole life in the cold, the only thing you want is a big fire." He began to make reckless investments, based not on logic, but on the flattery of his friends. Whoever praised him the most received the most money for their imaginary projects. He was buying admiration, and it was the most expensive commodity in the world. His fall was not like a sudden earthquake, but like the melting of a glacier, slow, steady, and unstoppable. First, he sold his jewelry to pay his gambling debts. Then, he was forced to auction off some of the paintings. His friends gradually distanced themselves. Their calls went unanswered. The invitations to parties stopped. The music was coming to an end. The breaking point came the night the creditors arrived at his palace gates, a palace that was now nothing more than an empty, echoing shell. Within a week, he lost everything: the furniture, the rugs, the fountains, and finally, the palace itself. Elias was back on the street. He was wearing the same coat he had at the beginning of the story, which now looked even more worn. He was a ghost once more. But this time, something was different. He was no longer hungry for that life. He had tasted it and felt its ashen aftertaste. One night, his feet unconsciously led him back to the same street, in front of the Astoria restaurant. It was raining. He looked inside. The same scene was repeating. Wealthy men, beautiful women, red wine. But this time, Elias saw something different. He no longer saw the sparkle and the warmth. He saw the masks that didn't reach the eyes, the conversations that were about money and power, not joy and love. He realized that the world behind the glass was a golden prison, and he had spent his entire fortune just to be an inmate there for a short while. He understood that all this time he had been trying to buy something that is not for sale. He thought that by buying the respect of others, he could buy respect for himself. But now he knew that true respect comes from within, not from one's pocket. Elias walked away from that street. He didn't look back. He found a job in a carpentry workshop. It was hard, honest work. At first, his hands, which had grown accustomed to the softness of silk, became calloused and sore. But with every hammer strike, with every plank of wood he smoothed, he felt he was building something real, not just a chair or a table, but a new life. His wages were low, but for the first time, money had meaning to him. Every coin held the story of his sweat and effort. He lived in a small, simple room, but at night he slept peacefully, without the fear of losing anything. He made friends who were with him not for what he had, but for who he was. One day, the workshop owner, a wise old man, said to him, "You look like a man who has been on a long journey." Elias smiled. "I went to the other side of the world, only to realize that everything I ever needed was right here." Conclusion. This story teaches us that true wealth is not measured by our possessions, but by the quality of our lives and our inner peace. Elias is a symbol of someone who tries to fill his internal voids with external luxuries. He spent his entire fortune to escape the shadow of his poverty, only to realize he was merely buying a new shadow, the far darker shadow of emptiness and loneliness. This tale shows that one cannot compensate for the past by accumulating wealth, but by building a meaningful present and an honest future. A person's greatest asset is not the money they inherit, but the character they build with their own two hands.